Contemporary colloquial Chinese poetry. That's what we're going to talk about today. And I know it's a very long name, but I promise it sounds a lot shorter in Chinese. 中国当代口语史. I hope that you're not daunted by the name of it though, because what I'm going to introduce to you today is one of the most important poetry movements that has been taking place in China since the early 2000s. So, to start with, I'm going to introduce you 3 poems that represent 3 distinct poetry styles. And let's see if you can recognize which one is a contemporary Chinese poem. So here's the first one, Little Pond by Yang Wanli. And the second one, The Answer by Bei Dao. And the third one, Baiyu and Elephant by Li Suo. I hope that wasn't too hard. Perhaps you can already tell from the title. It's hard to imagine someone from the Tang Dynasty naming their poem Baiyu and Elephant, right? So you probably guessed it right. The first one is from the Song Dynasty. The rhyming schemes and the organized stanzas, it's the typical impression people have for Chinese poetry. But let's move on to the second one. The Answer is a poem written by Bei Dao, and it's one of the most representative poems of mystic poetry. Mystic poetry is a poetry school that trended from the 1980s to 1990s, particularly focusing on individual expressions and detaching anything that's political. Finally, the star of today's video, Li Suo's Baiyu and Elephant. This is a great example of contemporary Chinese poetry because, first of all, it's colloquial. We don't see words like debasement or rhyming schemes. What we're seeing here is simply a poet recounting an anecdote that's a little bit absurd, personal, and true to her own life. Throughout the past 2 decades, contemporary poetry experienced significant growth, branching into different schools and factions, and poets even battle each other online thanks to the dot-com boom. For example, there was the Reckless, which is a bit wild, a bit raw, and people compare with the Beat generation in America a lot. Or Fei Fei, that rejected anything that's sublime or lyric. And Tamen, a group of young poets emerged from university that claimed poetry should stop at language. And most importantly, lower body poetry that emerged in the early 2000s that emphasized a more corporeal texture of poetry and truly emphasized the relationship between the poets and the events or the objects that's been described in the poetry. Now, each of the poetry school is worth a whole other video, so today we're going to focus on what's been happening in recent years. Now, as much as the West relies on journals and in-person conferences, Chinese poets equally depend on WeChat, the social media platform that every Chinese uses. But other than a live sharing platform, the subscription function on WeChat allows businesses and individuals to share content as well. And this is my account right there. So it's truly a platform where poets can share, discuss, publish, and circulate poetry. But you might wonder, why don't they just publish like the West do on journals? By speaking with Liang Yujing, a translator who helped dozens of Chinese poets publish their poems on Western journals like Agni, Temper Review, Chicago Quarterly Review, and so on, he mentions one critical point. The social interaction model is different between the West and the East. In the West, if you want to make an impact, one must contribute to reputable journals, attend key events, increase the visibility, and publish as frequently as you can. Whereas in China, it's a form of compensation to develop online communities because official publishing is difficult due to strict regulations. But also thanks to the online communities though, us poets get to see poems coming from different perspectives, different styles, and different parts of the country. A notable publisher that has a lot of influence in this space is called X Iron. It gathers poets from different age groups and different geographical areas and hosts events together just like these ones. Other than X Iron, we also see a lot of other communities like these ones. And they're all showing us different poetry philosophies, like crab poetry or post-colloquial poetry. And as Sheng Haobo says,
整体美学废话理论和后口语理论已经成为所有年轻口语诗人们的共同营养。
Again, that was some very rudimentary explanation of the poetry styles in China right now. And beyond the styles, we see so many different themes reflected in poetry as well. From a woman's struggle in the society to a family struggle due to generational complexity. And many of them are unique to China, precisely because of the traditions that we can't abandon, which often leads to some unspoken burden to individuals. But thanks to the colloquial poetry era in China, we get to hear from voices that we never thought we could hear from. And this is important. But you might wonder, why is this unique to China? Here's the reason. For the past decades, poets have often been perceived as individuals who have to have some intellectual capabilities, whether graduating from university or someone who's knowledgeable. But in China, this is no longer a requirement. More often than not, the poets I see around me come from every background or occupation you can think of. They could be a delivery man who survives off his daily salary without tips, or a CEO who needs to feed thousands of employees, or literally a jobless person who claims their job is to be a poet. Yes, you need to write well, but you don't need to write beautifully. That's what's charming about contemporary Chinese poetry. There is no barrier to entry. And sometimes we really stumble upon some crazy stories. And I'm not talking about something that all humans should care about, like some metaphysical concepts. I'm talking about the tangible absurdity that you and I could encounter in our life at any point. And that's what Chinese poetry brings to you. And that's today's content. For the following episodes, I will focus on a specific poet or a poetry school that's trending in China right now or has been in the past. I will maybe do some comparisons between Chinese poetry and English poetry too. So if you're interested, please subscribe or leave a comment below and let me know what you want to see. And if you're someone who's interested in poetry and want to create content, please reach out and we can do some collabs. See you next time.